Hi and welcome to the Cloaked Hedgehog's YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the encounters from the state of New York. It's a vast state and it has a lot of wooded areas, and there seems to be quite a lot of encounters here, and we're going to hear about 3 of them. This is an encounter that was sent to me by one of you people. One of the commenters on my videos. I was staying with my brother and father at a cabin on a hunting retreat in the upper part of New York. We had gone out there to hunt deer during black powder season. I was up late, sharpening knives for the dressing and cooking of anything we managed to take. It was about 2 a.m. I was getting ready to go to sleep once I finished the last knife up. I saw the security light outside flick on and got up to look at what it was. You're not allowed to take deer at night, but I figured there was no harm in just looking at one, seeing which way it went so we could track it tomorrow. And if it wasn't a deer, it would still be nice to see the local wildlife before I retired for the night. So I look out the window and I see these 2 big coyote-looking dogs with huge heads outside on all 4s. I initially thought they were coy dogs, a hybrid between coyote and a large dog. It happens sometimes in this area. So I watched these things sniff around. We had grilled some hot dogs earlier. They must have come looking for the smell. I watched them for a few minutes. And then one of them does this weird, jittering motion. It sort of stretched its hind legs out one at a time, and even through the glass I could hear a popping sound, a really horrible noise. This thing did one leg, then the other, and then it sort of rolled its shoulders and made another popping sound and stood up on its hind legs. We had put our bags of deer scent and stuff tied up into a tree to keep bears out. This thing reaches up, grabs the bag and pulls it down. The thing rips it open and tears through it. It finds the deer urine in there and sniffs it. Then it seemed almost angry and threw it into the wall of the cabin. At this point, it spots me. This thing looks at me, locks eyes, and the second one stands up on its hind legs. They look at me for a few seconds, staring me down. I pissed my pants because I thought I was gonna die. They seemed to be angry that I'd seen them or upset about it. They turned and ran off, still on their hind legs. I broke down crying, locked myself in the bathroom and refused to leave the cabin the rest of the trip. I stayed there and dressed and cooked the deer. I wouldn't go outside, and I actually covered the window in my bedroom because I was convinced I was going to wake up to one of them staring in at me. I estimate both creatures at about 8 to 8.5 feet tall. I couldn't see genitals on either of them. They had green eyes and were colored like coyotes, tan with gray on the back and white or cream bellies. They had tufts on the end of their ears like a bobcat, long fluffy tail like a wolf's tail. This is a pretty typical example of the effect that these creatures seem to have on the witnesses. Those who don't see the eyes tend to have a more positive memory of the experience, but for those who see the eyes, these are the ones that have a tendency to suffer nightmares and post-traumatic stress syndrome, and there's just got to be something about those eyes that we can't understand until we've seen them ourselves. This story comes from weekinweird.com, and it's a strange story about weird lights in the woods and a pack of dogmen. Me and two friends decided to go camping in southern New York. There was a dirt road that runs down the mountain, and then off of it are a lot of smaller off-road tracks that have some good camping spots. I don't know if you're really supposed to be camping there or not, but there's a lot of fire pits, so people do it anyway. We set up our tent and get a fire going, have a couple of beers and are bitching about our women, and the sun goes down. We all looked at each other because the woods got real quiet. You couldn't even hear crickets. Everything just went dead quiet. It felt like there was a lightning storm coming because you could feel the static in the air, and all the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Jamie started saying that it felt like the air was humming. And then all of a sudden there was a real deep bass noise, and this bright light in the distance that flashed up and lit up the whole woods. It looked like the light when a real big firework explodes for the first few seconds, but it lasted for probably a minute before it split up into 3 or 4 other lights and shot back down into the trees. We could see all the lights glowing out in the woods, and then there was a big gust of wind, and it was all gone. Everything smelled like it had just rained, but it never did. We didn't know what to do, but figured we would just wait it out, but nothing happened. We thought maybe it could have been a meteor or something, so we left it alone and went back to bitching about our women. At about 2 in the morning we decided to turn in, so Jamie and I went to go sleep in the tent, but Dan said he was going to sleep by the fire. An hour later I wake up because Dan is in the tent shaking us, saying there's something big watching the camp. He said it was about 50 feet from the fire and that he thought it might be a bear, but that it was standing on 2 legs and bobbing back and forth like it was trying to get a better look at him. While he was talking, we heard a loud scream. I've never heard anything like it before as long as I've been alive. It sounded like a pig being slaughtered, but deeper, and so loud it made your ears ring. Next thing I remember was hearing 3 or 4 more things come running towards the campsite, and the embers from the fire kicking up and landing on the tent. The things, or creatures, or whatever they were, kept running up to the tent and grunting and running back into the woods. Every once in a while, one of them would scream again and pull on one of the tent poles, dragging the whole tent a foot or 2. The tent was collapsing on one side, and we didn't know what else to do, so we just started screaming as loud as we could. Only took a minute, and then everything was quiet again, so we made a run for the truck as fast as we could and hit the gas. When we were leaving, we saw one of those explicit in the headlights standing in the road. I told Jamie to gun it, and the thing straightened up and puffed up its chest. It must have been 8 feet tall, had dark gray hair all over its body except the front. That hair was white or yellow around the chest. Its face looked kind of like a dog, but not really. I know what Bigfoot looks like, and this was way different. It didn't even move when we drove at it. We had to swerve around it, or we would have run right over it. We drove back down the mountain to the highway and parked the truck in a gas company parking lot. We were going to tell the cops what happened, but we didn't know if we were camping somewhere we shouldn't be, and we had been drinking all night and can't afford a DUI, so we just waited for the sun to come up and sobered up. When we drove back up to get our stuff, there wasn't anything there. Everything was gone. No tent, no cooler, nothing.
We told some of our friends what happened, and they won't believe us since we've been drinking, so we just decided to forget about it. I don't know if it had anything to do with the lights we saw, but it was the weirdest darn thing any of us has ever experienced. That was no bear. This is an account that was sent to Lon Strickler over at phantomsandmonsters.com, and it's very, 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 did I mention very, interesting, because not only is it quite old, it occurred in 1911, but it also happened on Broadway. Yeah, that Broadway. I would like to pass along a true story told to me by my grandfather when I was a young man. The story involves my great-grandfather, whose name was James McNamara. He was a patrolman in the New York City Police Department. This incident occurred in October of 1911 during the late evening hours. James was assigned to the theater district in the area of Broadway and 42nd Street. Another patrolman by the name of Dobbins was 2 blocks south on Broadway near 40th Street. Theatergoers were walking about and enjoying the Great White Way when suddenly there were screams emanating from an alleyway just below James's position. Both patrolmen ran towards the ruckus, forcing their way through hundreds of fleeing pedestrians. As they reached the alleyway, a tall, hairy beast ran out onto Broadway and towards 40th Street. Neither patrolman could believe what they saw. An 8-foot-tall wolf with human-like arms and legs running with skill and speed down the middle of Broadway. Soon the beast was facing an NYC Packard squad car, so it changed direction and moving back towards McNamara and Dobbins. The beast was growling as it moved forward. The patrolmen took positions by a newsstand, hiding and waiting for the horrible creature to move before them. Soon the beast was at the entrance of another alleyway near 42nd Street. Both patrolmen pulled their revolvers and took deadly aim. The beast quickly dropped to the gutter. Immediately, McNamara and Dobbins surrounded the body as other officers joined them. None of the public was allowed to come within 100 feet of the unknown canine. The body was quickly removed and taken to the mortuary. Both patrolmen were placed on other assignments. The squad was told by their superiors that this was simply mistaken identity and that the deceased was a man in a costume. Of course, that was not the truth. The press was later told that a large mad dog caused the disruption and that none of the public were injured. A few months later, a brief article was published in a Louisiana newspaper, the St. Mary Banner, Franklin, Louisiana, and picked up by a few other media outlets. New York. No sign remained in the Broadway Theater District the next morning, following the scenes that were enacted there one night when a maddened beast charged up and down, spreading terror and consternation, causing handsomely gowned women to faint and strong men to leave their cocktails untouched and flee for safety. That lion with a burning tail that broke loose during the Coney Island fire last spring was a tame affair in comparison with the Broadway monster. The beast is described in the police blotter as a large terrier. I'm sorry. All right. But it is evident that the police were anxious to minimize the seriousness of the panic. Hundreds of the witnesses will testify that the animal was at least 8 feet tall. Its foaming mouth and wicked fangs were too terrible for description. The beast was seen first at Broadway and 42nd Street, with a blood-curdling bow wow. Seriously? It rushed up to a beautiful woman as her companion rushed to her assistance and fearlessly planted a kick in the monster's hind quarters. "Ki-yee!" screamed the wild thing as it tore off down Broadway. At 40th Street, two boys with the foolhardiness of youth tried to seize the animal by its tail. The beast turned upon them and bayed horribly. Onto 39th Street, scattering pedestrians right and left, raced the great dog, if dog indeed it was. At the corner it emitted a whine that was even more terrifying than its growl, and turned back the way it had come. As the beast ran back, policemen McNamara and Dobbins drew their revolvers. Dobbins shot straight and true, and the monster keeled over in the gutter. The police have offered no further statements. Well, it may seem a little bit strange with the Dogman on Broadway, but Lon apparently did a little bit of research, and he actually found another article from the Holbrook News in Holbrook, Arizona in 1912. So whatever it was real enough to make the news. And it was real enough for the police to come up with the ridiculous cover story of a terrier. Couldn't they at least have said German Shepherd or something? A terrier. Why not a poodle? Oh well, this is the story, and this is our last story for today.
So that was the New York episode. Obviously, there are tons of more sightings in New York, so I suggest you take a look at the map and read about them. Now, take care and be safe, and I'll see you next time.